Paul Frame is stepping down. He's obviously been the face of the city for a long time.
Yes.
Why now? Why you?
Well, I think that now is the opportunity to bring the reforms further about that have been going on for the last 6 years. So that's the now. The timing is correct. And me, because I say reform instead of change, because we're on the right path in so many things on the city, but we can reform certain changes that we have done and can continue to do in the next 4 years once I'm elected as mayor. So the time is right with Paul leaving, and reform making sense now that we have done and will continue to do.
Voters are fortunate in the sense that they have 3 candidates, all of whom have a record of public service in Norfolk. They know the city well, and people know them. Why you instead of your 2 opponents, though?
Well, the difference is I sit at the table. And some people say, well, you sit at the table, but you know that table hasn't been that good to me. But overall, that table at council has been good. And I've developed the relationships at the council table that are different than just coming in cold. Paul Frame had once said when he first became mayor that it took him 8 years to be able to get to where he was and to figure it out, and it took a couple years at mayor to figure it out. I've spent 6 years on the council. I've developed the relationships with my fellow council members that have given me their support, Tommy Smeagol, Angela Graves, Mamie Johnson, that have endorsed me and asked me to run. And that makes the difference, because it takes 5 people to move anything, and we're already almost there. So that's what separates me out from my opponents.
The flip side of that is one of your opponents at least would say, well, you're an insider then. You don't understand the needs of the rest of the city.
Well, and I've heard that before in particular forums, but to distinguish it is we really were never the insiders when we came on. We've been fighting as reformers since day one. And I say we, it's Tommy and I have, Angela has. We fought the tie vest vote. We fought for TV cameras. We fought for the fraud hotline. We requested, and we ultimately are getting the dashboard for our city projects. So we've pushed all those reforms coming on council, all new and all fresh. We can continue that now.
Let me ask you about a couple of issues. I know you watch the news, and we've reported on another crime. A 12-year-old was shot. Crime is an issue for a lot of people, not only in the actual crime, but the perception. With Norfolk, first of all, do you support Chief Goldsmith? What kind of job do you think he's doing? And give me a couple of things, 2 or 3 things you might want to do differently in your crime.
I support Chief Goldsmith. In fact, I was one that advocated to Marcus. I thought he would do a great job. So, I think that we are blessed to have Chief Goldsmith here. A couple of things that I would do different. In fact, it was interesting. I was at a forum last night, and it was about 8 o'clock, and I had been at Ingleside, which makes Ingleside so special is keeping in mind that Trice Terrace, where the one murder had occurred in the middle of the day, is almost right behind the Police Operations Center on the boulevard. And the other murder that occurred on the other side of the industrial park in front of the POC. So it's so brazen, it doesn't matter if you have officers within blocks, it doesn't matter. So what struck me was I was somewhere last night at a forum, and I said, I was at Ingleside the other day, the day after, and it was 6 p.m., and I caught myself as a citizen going from the school to my car, and I'm looking around, knowing I was cognizant of what had happened the day before. And I said, I shouldn't be doing that. I shouldn't have to feel that in this city. And with that, what we've done in correcting what was going on around the Old Dominion area, where those neighborhoods that were there, we increased our police presence. We went to almost a broken windows, where we had planning. We added planning staff to go in there and clean up the neighborhood. Even parking violations mattered, and we were issuing citations. Those are the things that if you begin at that level with the community and move it up to that increased police presence, that's what needs to happen on Alexander Street. And I've asked for it before, and I think we've had it in the past, but we need to go back. Those apartment complexes need to have codes go through. They need to be in compliance. And if they're not in compliance and they're not well suited, then we need to move citizens out. Maybe the city has to buy those, what we did at Ward's Corner, which is something I pushed for. Maybe we have to go buy those and tear them down, get rid of that density and open the place up. Maybe we need to be in that. I think that we're looking at that. The city put $300,000 aside for that last September. So there's multiple layers as you look at it, And I hope that I can lay those multiple layers out like I just did as mayor.
It's not just a police problem.
No, it's not. You could put officers on every corner and you still have problems. And so we need to be able to stem what those problems are. They're even deeper. Of course, it's opportunity and education that we need to deal with. But right now, this rash needs to be dealt with, as I said, on almost a broken windows attitude. And I think that we're going to be going to that area very soon.
Let's talk about schools for a minute. You go to a lot of forums. I know you hear a lot about education, and this has been an issue in Norfolk for a long time. What have you learned? And on the basis of that, what would you do to improve Norfolk schools? Give me a couple of specific ideas.
Well, I'm not an educator.
But you have the power of the purse.
And I've learned, and see, that's the thing. As a lawyer, lawyers really don't know a lot about anything but the law, but we learn a lot about we learn a little bit about a lot of things. We learn a little about a lot of things. That being said, I co-chaired the Poverty Commission. And what came out of the Poverty Commission, because it really was about Norfolk Public Schools, they were the smarter people at the table that all I did was facilitate, said we need pre-K. We need to focus on pre-K. We need money to go to pre-K and save a generation. So I really firmly believe in that. I firmly believe in taking care of kids after school. And after school in the sense that we have Boys and Girls Clubs, we have community centers open, add to them, only because when we ask Richmond for it, we don't get it. Richmond's not willing to give us the money. This is something we have to do internally ourselves.
Norfolk taxpayers are going to have to.
We're going to have to look at being, right, and those can be capital improvement projects into the future as we begin. So when we look at our schools, as we build new schools, we have to start building community centers attached. At Broad Creek, we're adding a library to the new school. So that's how we can look at these types of things holistically. We have the Career Technical School. But we need to get businesses involved to be able to donate and to say, if you're going to get a certificate at our Career Technical School, the business has to be able to provide those funds to say, we want you to certify our workers for the following. So we can do that. We're getting there. We put $1.7 million into the Career Technical School. But we need to look pre-K and keeping the kids longer. School, after-school internships with City Hall. We have 200 that we do in the summer. Let's expand those during the school year and continue to keep the kids occupied.
Now, a couple of these things I talked about, the crime issue, the school issue, they affect the overall reputation of a city in Norfolk.
Oh, sure, I've lived it.
So what would you personally do as the most visible elected leader in Norfolk to sort of change the reputation, both regionally and nationally, because you are trying to attract businesses, well, at this point, globally?
Right. I think that to look back at what I have done, I had been requesting that Norfolk market itself and get a marketing director, and we've recently done that. Within the last 6 months, we've hired somebody who can market the city. And so being on council, that was a request. But I also think, I'm a firm believer in the Bloomberg School, which is you can turn on the TV set and Michael Bloomberg is there. And he is talking to the people of the city of New York when he was mayor. And it was almost on a daily basis that he was communicating. So when you communicate, whether it's to your citizens or you communicate to the state or to the nation, when you do that on a routine basis, you build that confidence and you build the ability to sell the city in a manner that puts it in its best light.
It's about visibility.
It is.
You have heard this, I know, over the years about people who complain, well, too many resources and too much attention is put downtown at the expense of my neighborhood. First of all, do you agree with that perception? And if so, what would you do to change it?
Well, if I agreed with it, I would be a hypocrite. And that's because when I came on council in 2010, I came on with the idea that Ward's Corner needed to be renaissanced, needed to have its renaissance. And with that, I would often say I was hired and vetted by the Ward's Corner Civic Leagues to do that. So it's very difficult to say that that's the case because we brought $7.25 million to the Ward's Corner area. That has turned into 700 jobs, $22 million in private investment, $1 million in revenues to the city on a yearly basis. So Ward's Corner is going through a renaissance like we haven't seen in a long time. So I can't necessarily agree I think others would look historically back and say, well, look at East Beach or look to other areas. Can we do better? Sure. I think 5 Points at Norview, exactly what we were talking about recently, is the next Renaissance area that we can look at. I think that areas in Ocean View should be a next Renaissance area that we look at. So we can make that happen.
So if the people from 5 Points, for example, come to you and say, look, I want what's happened in other parts of the city, we need your support, you'll get behind them?
5 Points, St. Paul's Quadrant, right, we do. And I think that the way you do it is you got to have a champion. Somebody on council that will say, I will take the St. Paul's Quadrant, I'm going to put it on my back and I'm going to move it forward, and we're going to meet every 30 days. We're going to see where we're going. We're going to begin a CIP, capital improvement plan, and be able to put that out there. Same thing at 5 Points. And that's how we can move all this forward. It takes that type of championing.
Most of the attention around light rail these days is on Virginia Beach. But the fact is Norfolk has light rail.
We do.
And there's a proposal at least to extend it in Norfolk. I mean, to the naval base, to the airport. In your mind, what should taxpayers support in terms of light rail? How much light rail does Norfolk need?
In my mind, when you tell me light rail, I think regionalism. It's almost interchangeable. So I have a hard time telling Norfolk taxpayers we're going to expand it within the city and it not leave the city, meaning going to Chesapeake, going further, going into Virginia Beach. So I don't see us taking that weight upon ourselves, but what I do see is I see a federal government coming in with their federal money, the little bit that's there that we have to get. State, as the state has done and Aubrey Lane has done with Virginia Beach, bringing that in, because I think we're in a position now, the way the law is set up in Richmond, that monies will come more to light rail systems and bus networks. So I could see it going from Chesapeake, from Volvo Parkway, coming into Norfolk, into Military Circle, where we're expanding Military Circle with 900 jobs, and then up into Little Creek Road and then to the Naval Base. That's where I see a future of light rail.
But only as part of a regional solution, not
Regional
something the city
solution.
should do on its own.
Regional solution.
Let me ask you something else about encroachment around naval installations or military facilities. It's been an issue in Virginia Beach for many years, Chesapeake around Fentress, and recently it's come up in Norfolk. What do you favor City Council doing, which means the taxpayers of Norfolk? Should Norfolk look at buying up properties around Naval Station Norfolk to protect against encroachment?
Well, I don't think the Navy's asking us to do that. I think the Navy has come to us in a partnership to be able to handle the growth within the area in a manner that's mutually agreeable to the city and the Navy. But the Navy's not asking the city to buy houses and to buy those up. I think the Navy doesn't want to see more density in the area, and I understand that. And what we understand now is they don't want to see a higher use, even though it's not, a structure doesn't change. So I think that with more discussion and more dialogue between the Navy and the city, the partnership will be as strong as ever.
But you don't see an urgent need right now to step in a regulatory way and start changing.
I don't see them coming and asking us for that.
You talked about your service in looking at the issue of poverty in the city. The fact is there are a lot of lower income people who are working poor, people who work every day. And but Norfolk has a limited space in its land. You want as much taxable stuff on the rolls as possible, right?
Yes.
What can you do to ensure that lower income people in Norfolk will have affordable housing?
Well, there's a couple of things that came out of the Poverty Commission. Well, first of all, the city itself has decided to always give living wages now for its own city employees. So we are the benchmark of that as a city to be able to tell other companies we do give the living wage and we do make it appropriate. We also in the city can do, and we have established a housing trust. And a housing trust fund would allow us to be able to build that trust fund up and use those funds appropriately for individuals who do need help. Right now our housing trust fund is only about $1.5 million. And we do realize we need to have it grow. And we're even asking ourselves, well, how much do we need to make it grow to make it work? So we can do that. I think that the future of St. Paul's Quadrant is important because that's that area just east of downtown. There's been a study that came about before I even came on council. And then early on in council, around 2012-13, they seemed to conclude the study. But there's been movement away from the study and looking at other areas, such as Eastlake in Atlanta, and using that type of concept. So I think we need to go back and reboot that and look at what can happen in that area that gives reasonable, affordable housing, but at the same time disperses poverty, that disperses poverty and doesn't keep it all in one area. And that's where we'll be successful.
Let me ask you about something. Sea level rise has gotten an awful lot of attention recently. I was over here when the governor came to town and the HUD secretary was in town, and there's a big, huge federal grant now available. Norfolk's going to get a big chunk of that money.
Sure, $120 million.
Is there a role for the city in combating that? After all, we have right outside our very building here. When it rains more than 2 inches, the street floods.
Oh,
so
yeah.
This is an issue all across the city, but is it just a federal and state thing, or can the city do practical things to help residents with their flooding problems?
Well, I mean, right here, what is on Bush Street, we have what, Lake WTKR,
right, yeah. We like to say Lake Olney. 'Cause we don't own
Lake
it.
Olney, okay.
The city can have it.
Sure, we know that. And I think that knowing that, and since I've been on council, the city has taken it upon itself to be ranked as one of the 100 most resilient cities from the Rockefeller Foundation. We have a resiliency officer, only one of 3 in the world. And that person's job is to deal with flooding and sea level rise and how it affects a city and how the city can come back from it. So we do that. The city has dealt with the berm plan in Ocean View, which is a $36 million permitted with the Army Corps of Engineers plan, of which the city has a portion of that we are paying. So the city is a leader already nationally. We know that. We've gotten the accolades through the foundation, through the Rockefeller Foundation, and through national media. But what I think that our next step is to make this the world center. We hired, Fugro came, and they are a contractor. They told us what the Dutch do. And we learned that, and that's helped us get our $120 million Chesterfield Heights grant. But what we can do is bring the world to Nauticus. I envision Nauticus as not only the Naval Museum for Hampton Roads, but I envision Nauticus as the world center for sea level rise, resiliency, climate change. Bring all the universities there and make it an academic space, make it an exhibit space that everybody will come to and understand this is the center of the world for academic research right here in downtown Norfolk. So that's the next step in my book. We continue to get federal funds, we continue to get those state funds that are available, but that's the next job that we can do is move into that next level of academia.
This is the final thing. Sure. Campaigns are not easy. They take a toll on the candidate, they take a toll on the family. Sure. It's a lot of time away from your real life, your normal life, right? As we get near the end of this process, what have you learned, either through doing this or about yourself in the process? Well,
I learned that my wife took down her GoFundMe page for her divorce lawyer about a week ago. She's decided to stick around.
Well, there's some good news.
You can only imagine. You can only imagine the stress on a marriage. What I've learned is I can tell you when I became a substitute judge and I sat in General District Court, I knew that when I had to give that up to run for council in 2010, I became a better lawyer because you learn to listen. You watch people's eyes for the truth and you watch their lips because you want to make sure what they're saying is really coming out. In having done this, I believe that I present much better in the sense of a speaker. I am much more comfortable. I was terrible when this started back in October in public speaking. Of all the ironies, give me 7 people or 12 people in a box and let me talk to them and try to get a unanimous verdict. I was very poor at communicating on a mass level and communicating ideas that are political because often they're not really grounded but in a little bit of fact and then it's a lot of idea. Where in the law it's a lot of fact and you're trying to interchange and fit the law into those facts. And so I've become, I believe, a better speaker, a better listener on a larger basis that I would have never been in the past. And so I have learned that. I've learned that about myself. And I'm much more comfortable with that today than I would have been 6 months ago.
Well, I don't know any wife who doesn't want her husband to be a better listener. So at the end of the campaign, you got that, right?
I got that down.
Good luck.
Thanks, man. I
Appreciate
really
your
appreciate it.
time.
It was fun.
Enjoy.
A lot of fun.
Great, thanks. We good?
Yes, sir.
Sorry.